So we are joined here on the show now by State Senator Roland Gutierrez, who's also a candidate now for U.S. Senator. Mr. Gutierrez, Mr. Senator, good afternoon. Thanks for joining us here on the show.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
All right, thanks for being here. So, of course, as I mentioned before, you are a current state senator running for U.S. Senator. So tell us, just off the top, what went into this decision to run for the U.S. Senate?
Well, first off, again, thank you. We've been, my wife and I, we talked about this for some time and really labored after this whole incident in Uvalde. And really the months after, when we started to see kind of the investigation flow out of there, and we started to see all of the problems that occurred, the failures of government, not just from law enforcement, but from ambulatory services, failures at the governor's office, and even failures from Ted Cruz when he refused to sign the Safer Communities Act, a pretty lighthearted bill, if you're talking about gun policy, quite frankly. It would have gone a long way to be about common sense gun solutions, but unfortunately, he didn't vote for that. We have to start talking about what's truly ailing Texas, and what's hurting us back home is the inability of people to be able to make ends meet, the inability to be able to have crazy out-of-pocket medical expenses if you're a working class family. Ted Cruz can do something about that, but he doesn't. He doesn't do anything to provide opportunity for our state. He voted against the infrastructure bill that brought $66 billion in new construction projects. Those are real jobs. When you and I were children, the senator from your area or the congressman would come down and they'd say, hey, look, I brought money to build this hospital or this roadway. We have to get back to doing what government should do rather than just provoke and scare us that the boogeyman is coming. I get that he wants to talk about immigration every day, and certainly we need to have that discussion, that conversation, and fix a broken immigration system on all fronts, no doubt. But that's not the reason. Some immigrant looking for a dream is not the reason we have poor education outcomes in Texas, poor healthcare outcomes in Texas, poor infrastructure problems. I mean, this is the guy that when 800 people died in the winter storm, this is the guy that takes off to Cancun while the rest of us had to grin and bear it. Look, nobody asked him to go out and stand up on an electric utility pole and try to fix the wires. We just simply wanted someone to stay here and serve the community as best you could. And if that meant, staying at home in the cold, well, then so be it. Instead, he chose to go off on a resort vacation. You know what I did? I went and gave water. There was a Walmart open. I put a pallet of water on my four-wheel drive, gave that water to a nursing home in Devine, Texas, that didn't have any water for their elderly. Went to another Walmart that stayed open for us, picked up another pallet, and we did that in Lytle, Texas. People are hurting in every way along this state, and we need public servants to do just that, serve the public. And I'm not patting myself on the back. I never did I think I'd be running for the United States Senate when that winter storm happened. But failure after failure, we've evidenced people that just simply like to talk about provocative things, but don't have real solutions for working class Texans. All my life, I've been that. I've been an entrepreneur. I've been in construction. I've been crazy enough to open up a restaurant once. That was the worst mistake I ever made in my life. But, I've been somebody that strived to work hard to help my community along the way. And for my last 20 years in public service and volunteer public service, we've done great big things in Texas, and we're going to keep doing that. We're going to talk to people for the next several months about what's important to us.
So, of course, a lot of your sights are set on Senator Cruz and his actions as senator. But before you get to Senator Cruz, you have challenger U.S. Representative Colin Allred, who's got a lot of excitement generated in the Democratic side of Congress. So how would you plan on taking him on in the primary, and why do you think that you're a better challenger for Ted Cruz than Mr. Allred?
Well, look, I've been in public office for 20 years, all in volunteer jobs. We have a proven record of getting big things done. My parents were immigrants to this country who worked very hard and instilled in us those values of working hard and educating ourselves. I'm going to do just that. And I'm going to work harder than Allred, harder than Cruz. At the end of the day, certainly I don't have nothing bad to say about Colin Allred. I know that he raised a good bit of money in large part because I think Ted Cruz was able to do that for him. There's a lot of people that don't like him. I think that we've got to be able to energize Texans along the border. I think that I have a unique ability to be able to do that, to speak both languages. We're going to talk to them about what is ailing them. We're going to talk to Texans in Houston and Dallas and everywhere in between in the Panhandle. And we're going to try to energize people about the issues that matter most to us, which are common sense solutions to, healthcare and education and infrastructure, to the things that we absolutely need to do to safeguard our children. We're going to keep talking to people. And I think that people are going to be surprised at the end of the day in March and then again in November.
Now, one of the priorities you've mentioned is your fight for gun control, your efforts to kind of push legislation in that direction. And of course, your current district as a state senator, Uvalde, is in your district. You are their senator, their state senator anyway. But some people have kind of criticized you for being opportunistic in kind of using that tragedy to bolster your political ambitions. What do you say to that?
Well, I say it's nonsense. Look, I sued the government to try to get the information that they would not show us. The police failed those children. They failed them for 77 minutes. Our Department of Public Safety, Steve McCraw, failed those children. He should resign still yet today for his failures, for his 97 cops that were out there who did nothing. We as policymakers need to know when things go wrong. And so it led me to sign a non-disclosure agreement where I saw that failure. And I've seen horrors that most people could never imagine, more blood than you've ever seen in your life. Those images I don't take from my mind. I can't erase them. Those families are friends of mine, and they've become family to me. I will forever talk about this issue because it matters so much to them. Not only do they want us to never forget their children's names, and we never should, but they want to make sure that this never happens to anybody again. When 66% of Republicans agree with us that we should raise an age limit on access to an AR-15 to 21, that we should have extreme risk protective orders because you don't want some mentally ill kid to have a gun, and if you see something and say something, then we should have a law that says we should take those guns away. We need to close the gun show loophole because you don't even need an ID to go out and get a gun at a gun show. Where we're at on guns right now is just a bit crazy. I own a lot of them. I'm a gun owner. I get this. I don't own any AR-15s. I don't need one. But we need to have common sense here. Republican voters are in agreement with me, but yet the Republican politicians refuse to do what's responsible because there's so much in the pocket of the NRA. We've got to do something, and we've got to do something now. People like Ted Cruz that have gotten hundreds of thousands of dollars, that's the truth, hundreds of thousands of dollars of the NRA do not have the backs of the American people. And so we're going to do some things, and we're going to make sure that we continue to work on common sense gun solutions for sure.
Now, a question from our live chat. One of our viewers, Austin, he asks, what are your thoughts on the Supreme Court's recent activity and some of the stories coming out of the Supreme Court and the justices and the things that they've been up to recently?
Well, I don't think our founding fathers ever envisioned a court like this. They envisioned an independent court, free of influence from corporations, free of influence of the wealthy, free of influence from politics. But this Supreme Court has really gone very, very rogue and very, very far right. And not to mention, quite frankly, things that are, quite frankly, I see as certainly unethical and possibly corrupt. When you have a billionaire buy your house like they did with Clarence Thomas, that's just wrong. Take you on world-class vacations that cost thousands and thousands of dollars. That's just wrong. And then have opinions and decisions and lawsuits that end up in their courts. What's happening now at the Supreme Court is so far afield of what anything our founding fathers envisioned. We have to make sure that we have legislators that go back and reinstitute Roe versus Wade and bring back the rights to women that we so much fought for 50 and 60 years ago. Everything that we have faced, that we fought for on the civil rights movement, from women's rights to affirmative action, has been eroded by this Supreme Court. And we're going to have to make sure that we win this Senate seat so that we have people that are fighting for a good cause to make sure that these things get overturned in a positive direction.
So with that said, what are your thoughts as a candidate for U.S. Senate on any potential changes to the Supreme Court, and what could Congress do to make those changes?
Well, look, Congress has within its power the ability to expand the court. The court has changed from session after session, and certainly we can have those discussions over time. But the greater thing that we need to do is have a Congress that listens to its people. The vast majority of people aren't in favor of the decisions that have been made in Roe versus Wade. And so we need to be able to go back and fight for legislation that makes sense. The vast majority of people want to have still have benefited from affirmative action, don't want to have this decision that this court has made. The vast majority of people don't want to have marginalized people on the same-sex issues that the Supreme Court is weighing in on. This court has become a political arm of the Republican Party, of the far-right Republican Party. Let's be very clear. That shouldn't be that way. And so it's important that we win this legislative seat, that we win this Senate seat, so that we can push back against a rogue court. And so we'll do everything in our power down the road, but first we got to get elected.
Okay. Now let's come back to your current job for a moment. Of course, you're a state senator here in Texas. And so Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick and Speaker Dade Phelan from the House, they announced an agreement today on property taxes out of that first special session. So what are your thoughts on this proposed legislation, and what role did you take in drafting and kind of getting it passed through the state legislature?
Well, I'll tell you, about 2 weeks ago, we passed our proposal over, which was $100,000 tax exemption. We all unilaterally agreed in a bipartisan way in the Senate to do that. And we also agreed on my amendment, which was a pay raise for our teachers to be included in that piece. Sadly, the Dade Phelan and folks in the House weren't in favor of that. They stripped out the teacher component. Now we will have the $100,000 exemption. We'll have a piece of compression, which is basically buying down some school taxes on the state side. That should happen. And we'll also have a graduated sense of on appraisal caps. And so we're going to have a little bit of everything. It's going to be the largest tax cut that we've seen in our state's history. But sadly, we have disenfranchised our teachers. They're some of the lowest paid in the United States. The problem that happens in that regard is that we're going to be stuck in a special session in September with Greg Abbott holding a gun to our head saying, go do this voucher bill if you want these teacher pay raises. The teachers need to wake up. Texans need to wake up. We need to do better for our teachers, for sure. And we need to push back against a voucher program that's only going to help 180,000 kids. I'm sorry. We have 5 million kids. So how is it fair that somebody get a voucher for $7,000 and the vast majority of us just simply don't? It's a system that just simply is not going to make sense. It's just another political stunt by Greg Abbott and others like him. And so we have to be very mindful of what's going on. We have to push back and work hard, and we have to go vote, because what's happening coming out of the Republican Party now is not the Republican Party of Joe Strauss or Ronald Reagan. I don't know who these people are right now. I don't know who Ted Cruz thinks he's working for, but he's not working for Texans.
Now, regarding the property tax bill, and just in practical, just everyday terms, of course, you hear the exemptions, the lower property taxes, like the rhetoric is very positive for homeowners in Texas. But let's talk about, if you can, let's kind of break down the real world effects for our school districts. And if we're lowering property tax rates and, of course, lowering property tax income in the state, what does that do to our school districts in a real world sense?
We have, for the last several years, truly been weakening our school systems. We need to be very mindful of this. Getting tax breaks are important, but we also have to have balance. Government, and by virtue of and by way of your taxes, has to provide the basic functions of government: good roads, good schools, good hospitals. And when we begin to creep up and just cut all the time, without looking at the ramifications of it. We're starting to see the fact that we have some of the poorest schools in the nation, with school performance at 45th and funding at 45th. Let's not kid ourselves. Republicans have poor boyed this state to nothing. We can do so much better, and we must. We have to reinvest in ourselves. Just like you paint your house, you fix your foundation, you put in new windows. We have to do the same thing in government. We can do all of that and still balance modest tax reductions from time to time. But we have to make sure we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Now, speaking of, a moment ago, you mentioned the next special session regarding the voucher program here in Texas, and you mentioned that teacher pay raises were tied to that intrinsically. Is that actually the case? Are those pay raises going to be stuck to that program, and without it, they're not going to pass?
Well, I'm going to still try an amendment on Wednesday to have our teachers give them the pay raise that the Senate promised them 2 weeks ago. I'm going to add it, and we're going to try to have that fight again. We still have 2 weeks left in this session. People need to be very aware of what Greg Abbott is doing, and he wants to hold us hostage with vouchers, and teacher pay raises are going to be the hostage. That's not right. It's not fair. It's not just. And it's not something that we should be doing to help out some rich folks that have their kids in private school. It's simply not fair. We've got a lot of work to do in this space, but most thing that we have to do as Texans is we have to vote for people that have our common interests at heart. Right now, Greg Abbott does not have our common interest at heart.
Now, I want to turn to previously in the regular session. There's a clip I want to play for our viewers here. You had a debate, if you will, with State Senator Brian Hughes, who is from right here in East Texas, regarding SB 12. It's the drag show bill. And I want to play a clip for our viewers to kind of come back to you to get your thoughts on that. So, just 1 second, I'll play that for our viewers now. This is your debate with State Senator Brian Hughes. Stand by.
If it appeals to the prurient interest and meets any of those above prongs, it's captured by the bill. Because this is about protecting children. What should be done in the presence of children?
Man, I'm telling you, I've been all about this session about protecting children, my friend, and we haven't done a whole lot of protecting the children when it comes to guns and ammunition. I've been all about it this session, my friend.
Okay, so you kind of push back on Senator Hughes regarding protecting children. A lot of cheers in the gallery at that point. So, what was your approach to that, and what kind of came of that debate with you and Senator Hughes?
Yeah, I mean, that was this. I don't know if that was the transgender stuff or the drag queen bill about taking your kid to a drag show. I don't know which one it was. But, at the end of the day, look, I get that, people think that those things are important. I get that, and I understand that. But we have to really have an honest discussion with ourselves. Those types of pieces of legislation are meant to divide us, nothing else. I mean, how many people do you think are taking their kids to a drag show? Very few. Very few. And yet we're spending time and energy and effort of a very limited legislation talking about that, but rather than talking about school safety and protecting our kids in schools. Listen, 66% of Republicans agreed with us on common sense gun safety solutions, and yet we couldn't even pass not one of those things: extreme risk protective orders, or raising the age limit, or closing the gun show loophole. That's what my objection was at the time. You can't just pretend to be about protecting kids and then do nothing about it. And you can't push forward pieces of legislation that simply pick on marginalized people in our society, just a few, and expect us all to believe that they are the reason that things are gone wrong. I'm sorry, but there's not a transgender person or an LGBTQ or a drag queen that is responsible for poor education outcomes and poor health care outcomes and poor infrastructure outcomes where 800 people die in a winter storm. We have to fix the real problems that are facing Texas today. And people like Ted Cruz and others, they don't want to do that. They would rather talk about drag queens. And like Ted Cruz this weekend, talked about Barbie, Disney, and a map of China on some movie. It's just nonsense. It's nonsense, and they should get to work. They should get to work because we are demanding it. We pay taxes into this deal. It's the benefit of the bargain, right? The bargain is I'm going to pay taxes and government should give me something back. We're simply not getting that from today's Republican Party.
You mentioned the divisiveness, and one of the reasons that some of these politicians, they turn to this rhetoric is because it works. I mean, they rile up their supporters, and it really gets a lot of momentum going for them in terms of just support and elections, et cetera. So that divisiveness kind of goes to the constituents at this point. And so if that is one of the issues, how do you suggest that gets repaired, if you will, to where the electorate itself isn't so divided?
We're going to talk to all constituents, Republicans and Democrats alike throughout Texas, and we're going to hope to bring them back to the way we were raised, because the way we were raised with Christian values wasn't about picking on people. It wasn't about tearing people up. It was on a notion that we all work together. When your barn burned down, you'd help your neighbor. When you needed a repair around your house, you'd help your neighbor. It didn't matter what color he was just your neighbor. We have to get back to common decency in this state, in this country. And the very notion that Ted Cruz and others are out there just picking on marginalized people doesn't solve what's ailing us at home. Most of those people that are listening to this divisive rhetoric and thinking that they have their back, they need to ask themselves if their lives have gotten better in the last 30 years, because Republicans have been in control in Texas for 30 years. And if you're still hurting, and if you're still struggling to pay the bills, and your health care costs are still outrageous, you need to find another team. You need to find someone that actually wants to find a solution to the real problems that are facing us. I aim to have that discussion.
Now, kind of turning back to your tenure here as a state senator, you filed 28 bills in the session, and none made it to the Senate floor. So why do you think that is, first of all?
Well, it's clear that Republicans don't want to have a common sense discussion on common sense gun reform, and I understand that. But listen, we've done great things in the legislature, in the Senate and in the House. And I pushed great things on, like I did that amendment. Unfortunately, the House did not see their way clear on the teacher pay raise. Last session, created the Farmer Suicide Prevention Act, which was an amendment onto a bill. And Sid Miller, in committee, said that my amendment has saved 60 lives. People don't know this, but farmers have the highest incidence of suicide in the nation per capita. They're one drought away from losing the family business. That's real pain. And this program has been very helpful. I created the National Center for Warrior Resiliency in San Antonio for veterans to get off opioid addictions. It's helped thousands of people. I protected our military bases all across Texas against encroachment from developers that would damage and affect our military missions. That's real money and jobs that we get in our civilian jobs in our Air Force bases in Texas and our military bases. We have to talk about real things here. We have to be serious people, and we have to expect to elect serious people to office. This clown that we have right now in Ted Cruz is not a serious person. We have to understand this. And so if you buy off on what he's selling, all I'd ask from you is just think for a second. Think what he's done for you. Think what he's brought back to your community. He's not the senator that brought a job to Texas. He's not the senator that brought a roadway to Texas. He's not the senator that did anything for us that was positive. This is what this is about. It's not about Republicans and Democrats anymore. It's about doing the work of government. And the work is bring us back the resources, Governor, because by God, we don't pay enough taxes. We should get something in return.
So if viewers are watching this right now and want to learn more about you and your platform and your positions here, how would they go about doing that?
Well, I'd ask people to go to rolandfortexas.com. Look, my parents were immigrants to this country. They worked real hard, and they pushed me to work and to educate myself, which I did. I became a lawyer. I have a small construction company. As I said once before, I opened a restaurant. That was the dumbest thing I'd ever done. But my whole life is based on work and helping people. We've got to be able to help each other through when things are not going so well. Things aren't going so well in this state. We can do a hell of a lot better, and I hope that we can all do that together.
Okay. Senator Gutierrez, again, thank you so much for your time today. We look forward to talking to you again in the future.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Have a great day.